The stars belonged to the Velkari Empire. For 3,000 years, their bioships had sailed between worlds, conquering everything they found. Emperor Thexval sat on his crystal throne on Nexus Prime, the most powerful being in the known galaxy. His empire stretched across 10,000 star systems. No one had ever successfully fought back against his fleets. The Emperor's morning began like any other. Reports flowed in from across the galaxy. New worlds discovered. New species conquered. New resources claimed for the Empire. Thexval barely listened anymore. Victory had become boring. "Your Majesty," said General Vextar, bowing low before the throne. "Our scouts have found something interesting." The Emperor's 6 eyes focused on his most trusted military commander. "Another primitive world to add to our collection?" "Perhaps. The scouts found a small human colony in the Kepler 442 system. They have maybe 12 ships, old technology, weak weapons." Vextar's mandibles clicked with amusement. But they refused to surrender. This caught the Emperor's attention. Species usually surrendered immediately when they saw Velkari bioships. The smart ones did anyway. They refused. Their leader sent back a single word: no. Emperor Thexval leaned forward. In 3 millennia, only a handful of species had been foolish enough to resist. All of them were now extinct. How entertaining. Take a proper fleet and crush them. Make it educational for any other species watching. Already in motion, Your Majesty. 200 ships should be enough to handle 12 human vessels. Far away in the Kepler 442 system, Admiral Kim Dae-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship. The human colony ships floated nearby, filled with families who had traveled years through space to build new homes. Now Velkari scouts circled like sharks, sending the same message over and over: submit or die. Dae-ho was 53 years old. He had gray hair and tired eyes. He had fought pirates and asteroid miners, but never aliens. His 12 ships were Old Earth Defense Force vessels. Good ships, but not built for war against an empire. "Admiral," said his communications officer, "the Velkari are broadcasting again." "Put it through." The alien voice was translated by their computer. "Humans of Kepler 442, you have 72 hours to surrender completely. Submit to Velkari rule, or be destroyed. This is your final warning." The bridge crew looked at their admiral. Everyone knew their ships could not win against the Velkari Empire. Everyone had heard the stories of what happened to species that resisted. Complete annihilation. "Open a channel," Dae-ho said quietly. "Channel open, sir." "This is Admiral Kim, Dae-ho of the Kepler Defense Fleet. We have received your demands." He paused, thinking of the families in the colony ships, thinking of Earth, so far away. "Our answer is no." The Velkari scout ships immediately moved to attack positions, but then stopped. Their commander seemed surprised by the human response. "You refuse? Do you understand what this means?" "Yes," Dae-ho replied. "It means we fight." The scout ships withdrew to a safe distance. In 72 hours, a Velkari invasion fleet would arrive. Dae-ho knew his 12 ships could not stop them, but maybe they could buy time for the colonists to escape. On Earth, Dr. Park Soo-jin received the emergency transmission in her laboratory deep beneath the mountains of South Korea. She was 42 years old, brilliant, and had spent the last 15 years working on humanity's most secret project. "Doctor?" her assistant said urgently. "We just got word from Kepler 442. The Velkari Empire has found them." Soo-jin stopped working and looked up from her computer screens. For 15 years she had known this day would come. Humanity had been preparing for it. "How long do we have?" "Admiral Dae-ho estimates 72 hours before the invasion fleet arrives." Soo-jin nodded and pressed a button on her desk. Red lights began flashing throughout the facility. Project Thunderbolt was going active. "Contact Captain Lee Min-ho immediately. Tell him to prepare the Indomitable for immediate departure." "Yes, Doctor." Soo-jin walked to the massive window that looked out into the underground hangar. There, hidden from the world for 15 years, sat humanity's secret weapon. The UES Indomitable was unlike any ship ever built. It was 2.5 kilometers long, shaped like a knife, and covered in weapons that most humans had never imagined, while the rest of humanity built cargo ships and colony vessels. Project Thunderbolt had built a Dreadnought. While other species developed energy weapons and plasma cannons, humans had perfected something else entirely: pure kinetic force. Captain Lee Min-ho was 38 years old and had trained his entire adult life for this moment. He had never commanded a ship in real combat, but he knew every system on the Indomitable better than his own home. "Captain," his first officer said, "we just received orders from Earth. We're going to Kepler 442. Min-ho nodded. He had known this day would come eventually. The Indomitable had been built for one purpose: to show the galaxy that humanity was not defenseless. How long to get there? With our gravity drive, 18 hours. Then we leave immediately. All hands to battle stations." Throughout the ship, 300 crew members prepared for humanity's first real space battle. They were engineers, scientists, and soldiers. They came from Korea, Japan, China, and dozens of other Earth nations. They had trained together for years, but none of them had ever fired the Indomitable's weapons in anger. Dr. Park Soo-jin watched through the underground facility's cameras as the Indomitable powered up its exotic matter reactors. The ship's hull began to glow with barely contained energy. This was the moment 15 years of work had been leading toward. The Indomitable lifted off in complete silence. Its gravity drive made no sound, left no exhaust trail. It simply rose through the hidden shaft and disappeared into space, heading for Saturn's rings where it would make its jump to hyperspace. Back in the Kepler 442 system, Admiral Dae-ho looked at the countdown timer on his display. 68 hours until the Velkari fleet arrived. His crews were preparing for a battle they could not win, but they would fight anyway. It was the human way. He thought about his wife back on Earth. He thought about the children in the colony ships. He thought about all the human worlds that would follow if the Velkari Empire decided humanity was worth conquering. But mostly he thought about a conversation he had had with Dr. Park Soo-jin 5 years ago. She had told him that if humanity ever faced a galactic threat, they would not face it alone. Dae-ho did not know about Project Thunderbolt. He did not know about the Indomitable. But he had faith that Earth would not abandon them. In 18 hours he would discover just how much faith was justified. The final battle for the Velkari Empire began at dawn on Nexus Prime. Emperor Thexaval stood in his war room, watching as human dreadnoughts emerged from hyperspace around his capital world. 12 ships against the last 1,000 vessels of his once mighty fleet. The odds should have favored the Velkari. 1,000 bioships defending their home world, fighting with the desperation of a species facing extinction. But after 8 months of continuous defeats, no one believed the numbers meant anything anymore. "Your Majesty," Admiral Texbar said quietly, "perhaps we should consider evacuation." The Emperor's 6 eyes remained fixed on the tactical display. For 3,000 years, his ancestors had ruled from this world. The Crystal Throne had never been threatened by foreign enemies. To abandon it now would mean the end of everything the Velkari had built. "No," Thexval said firmly. "We make our stand here. If the Empire dies, it dies defending its heart." Captain Lee Min-ho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking out at the massive Velkari fleet arranged in defensive formation around Nexus Prime. This was the largest concentration of enemy ships they had faced, but the outcome would be the same, as always. "Captain," Navigator Park Hyewan reported, "all human vessels are in position. We have 12 dreadnoughts ready for coordinated attack." Composition of enemy fleet? Science Officer Yoon Tae-min checked his displays. 1,037 bioships, Captain, including their newest and most powerful vessels. They've pulled back everything they have left. Min-ho nodded. The Velkari were fighting with everything they had left. It was admirable in its way, but it would not change. The result: open communications with the enemy fleet. "Channel open, Captain. Emperor Thexaval, this is Captain Lee Min-ho. This is your final opportunity to surrender. Order your ships to stand down and your people will be spared." From his flagship, Emperor Thexaval responded personally. "Captain Lee, I am the heir to 3 millennia of conquest. The Velkari Empire does not surrender. Then you have chosen the hard way, Minho replied sadly. All human vessels, begin attack. The 12 dreadnoughts moved forward in perfect formation, their exotic matter reactors charging to full power. The Velkari fleet opened fire with everything they had, filling space with more concentrated firepower than had ever been seen in galactic history. The result was exactly what everyone expected. The human ships emerged from the energy barrage completely unharmed and began their methodical destruction of the Velkari fleet. But this time was different. This time the Velkari fought back with suicidal courage. Bioships rammed themselves against the human vessels, their crews sacrificing their lives to try to damage the enemy. Organic bombs were detonated in desperate suicide attacks. Ancient vessels commanded by officers who had served the Empire for centuries charged directly into the human formation. None of it mattered. The human point defense destroyed the ramming ships before they could make contact. The suicide bombs were intercepted and neutralized. The ancient vessels were reduced to debris just like all the others. Captain, Weapons Officer Han Jae-wook reported, "Enemy resistance is fiercer than usual, but it's not affecting our operations. Estimated time to complete fleet destruction, 6 hours. Admiral Daeho, commanding the human task force from his flagship, watched the battle with growing sadness. The Velkari were fighting bravely, but they were fighting with obsolete weapons against impossible odds. It was like watching medieval knights charge against modern tanks. Admiral, his communications officer said, "We're receiving multiple surrender requests from individual Velkari ships. Standard response: any ship that stands down will be spared. Any ship that continues fighting will be destroyed." Across the battlefield, Velkari captains faced the hardest choice of their lives: surrender and live, or fight and die for an empire that was already dead. Some chose honor and died with their ships. Others chose survival and watched their comrades perish. Emperor Thexval stood on his flagship's bridge as human ships systematically destroyed his fleet. 500 ships dead, 700, 800. The mathematics of extinction played out with mechanical precision. "Your Majesty," Admiral Texbar said urgently, "we have to evacuate. The flagship is being targeted." Thexval looked around, his command center one last time. His officers, his loyal crew, the symbols of an empire that had ruled the galaxy. All of it would be gone soon. "No," he said quietly. "A true emperor dies with his empire." The rail cannon round that destroyed the Imperial flagship was perfectly aimed. The bioship simply vaporized, taking the last emperor of the Velkari with it. Captain Minho watched the enemy flagship die and felt no satisfaction. Emperor Thexval had been a conqueror and a tyrant, but he had died with dignity. It was more than many tyrants deserved. "Captain," Communications Officer Choi Ye-jin reported, "the remaining Velkari ships are requesting permission to surrender." Minho looked at the tactical display. Less than 200 bioships remained out of over 1,000. The Velkari fleet was broken, their emperor dead, their empire finished. All vessels cease fire, except surrenders from any ship that stands down. The Battle of Nexus Prime ended 18 hours after it began. The Velkari Empire, which had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia, was officially dead. Dr. Park Soo-jin received the final after-action report in her underground laboratory on Earth. The last Velkari fleet had been destroyed. The Empire was finished. Humanity had won a complete victory. "Doctor," her assistant said, "we're receiving communications from across the galaxy. Hundreds of species are declaring independence. The Centauri Republic wants to establish formal, diplomatic relations. Even former Velkari worlds are asking to join a human alliance." Soo-jin smiled and looked at the galactic map on her wall. The red markers representing Velkari control were gone. Blue markers showed human colonies. Green markers showed newly independent worlds. The galaxy was free for the first time in 3,000 years. What about the surviving Velkari? "The species is requesting asylum. They want to settle on a single world and renounce all claims to their former empire." Soo-jin nodded. Humanity had fought to liberate the galaxy, not to commit genocide. The Velkari people could live in peace if they chose to abandon their warlike ways. Admiral Deho stood on the bridge of his flagship, orbiting the former Velkari capital. Below, the crystal cities of Nexus Prime gleamed in the sunlight. For the first time in millennia, those cities were free. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "Earth is asking for a full situation report." "Tell them the mission is complete," Deho replied. "The Velkari Empire has been defeated. The galaxy is free." 6 months later, Captain Lee Minho stood in the assembly hall on Nexus Prime as representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered for the first Galactic Peace Conference. Species that had been enslaved for centuries sat next to their former oppressors. Beings who had never known freedom worked together to build a new future. Dr. Park Soo-jin had come from Earth for the historic occasion. She watched as Captain Minho accepted the formal surrender of the last Velkari military commander, an old admiral named Kexthor, who had served the Empire faithfully for 2 centuries. "Admiral Kexthor," Minho said formally, "do you surrender all claims to the former territories of the Velkari Empire?" "I do," the old Velkari replied, his voice heavy with the weight of 3,000 years of history. "The Empire is dead. Long live the peace." The assembly hall erupted in cheers from 1,000 different species. Freedom had a sound, and it was beautiful. Later, as the celebration continued, Dr. Soo-jin found herself standing alone on a balcony overlooking the Crystal City. Captain Minho joined her, both of them looking up at the stars. "Doctor," Minho said quietly, "what happens now? We built the Dreadnoughts to fight the Empire. The Empire is gone." Soo-jin smiled. "Now we build something better. The Empire ruled through fear. We'll show the galaxy what it looks like when people work together by choice." Above them, the stars shone with the light of freedom. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not as conquerors, but as liberators. The Velkari Empire had been the galaxy's greatest fear for 3 millennia. Now the galaxy's greatest hope had arrived in the form of an unknown Earth Dreadnought and the species that built it. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and it all started with humanity refusing to say yes when a bully demanded surrender. The Indomitable orbited peacefully above Nexus Prime, its weapons silent for the first time since the war began. The ship that had shattered an empire now stood guard over the peace it had helped create. Earth had kept its promise. Humanity had come to the stars not to conquer, but to ensure that no one would ever again have to bow before tyrants. The galaxy was free, and it would stay that way forever. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The Velkari Empire, once spanning 10,000 star systems, was contracting like a dying star. Human dreadnoughts appeared wherever Velkari fleets gathered, and the results were always the same. Total destruction of Imperial forces. Emperor Thexval stood in his throne room, looking out at the capital city of Nexus Prime. For the first time in 3 millennia, Velkari citizens were afraid. Ships fled the outer systems daily, bringing refugees and tales of human ships that could not be stopped. "Your Majesty," Intelligence Minister Kextal said carefully, "we have received reports from 14 more systems. The humans have liberated all of them." "How many ships did we lose this time?" 63 bioships across 4 separate engagements. No human vessels were destroyed. Thexval felt his ancient hearts beating faster. 63 ships. Some of those vessels had been in service for centuries, commanded by his finest officers. Now they were debris floating in space. "What is the status of our defense fleets?" "Pulled. Back to core systems, Your Majesty." "Admiral Texbar believes we can make a stand at the Meridian Line." The Meridian Line was a defensive position that had never been tested in war. For 3,000 years, no enemy had been strong enough to threaten the Empire's core worlds. Now human ships were advancing steadily toward the heart of Velkari. "Space. How many ships do we have left?" "Approximately 4,000 bioships, Your Majesty, but morale is extremely low. Many captains are requesting transfer to civilian duties. 4,000 ships. It should have been enough to stop any enemy. But these were not ordinary enemies. These were humans with weapons that turned the basic principles of warfare upside down. On Earth, Dr. Park Soo-jin watched the tactical displays in her underground command center. Red markers representing Velkari-controlled systems were disappearing from the galactic map every day. Her dreadnoughts were performing even better than expected. "Doctor," Fleet Admiral Kim Dae-ho said, entering the command center. He had been promoted after the victory at Kepler 442, and now commanded humanity's growing space fleet. "The Velkari have sent another communication." "The same as before?" "No. This one came directly from Emperor Thexval himself." Soo-jin raised an eyebrow. For 6 months, the Velkari had refused to acknowledge Earth's existence. They had treated the human attacks as terrorist actions by unknown pirates. Now their emperor was communicating directly. What does he want? Negotiation. He's offering territorial concessions, tribute payments, even a place for humanity in the Empire's hierarchy. Soo-jin laughed, but there was no humor in it. After 3,000 years of conquest and slavery, he wants to negotiate. What should we tell him? Soo-jin looked at the map again. Blue markers now showed 37 human colonies, many of them on worlds recently liberated from Velkari occupation. Millions of beings were free for the first time in generations. Tell the Emperor that Earth will consider negotiations when he surrenders unconditionally. Until then, the liberation continues. Captain Lee Min-ho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as it approached the Meridian Line. Intelligence reports indicated that the Velkari had assembled over 800 ships to defend this position. It was their largest fleet concentration since the war began. Captain, Science Officer Yoon Tae-min reported, long-range sensors are detecting massive bioship formations. They're arranged in a defensive grid across the entire system. Numbers? At least 800 vessels, Captain. Possibly more hiding behind the larger ships. Min-ho studied the tactical display. 800 ships was a significant force, but the Indomitable had faced large fleets before. The outcome was always the same. Navigator Park Hae-won, take us directly into the center of their formation. Let's see if they want to fight or run. The Velkari fleet was commanded by Admiral Texbar, the Empire's most experienced defensive strategist. He had spent months preparing for this battle, positioning his ships to create overlapping fields of fire that should overwhelm even the impossible human defenses. "Admiral," his sensor operator reported, "the human ship is approaching directly. It's not attempting to avoid our defensive grid." "Excellent. Signal all ships to prepare for coordinated fire. We'll hit them with everything at once." Texbar had studied every report about human ships. Their point defense could stop normal attacks, but no system could handle the concentrated fire of 800 vessels. Mathematics was on his side. The Indomitable entered the Velkari defensive grid at full speed, ignoring the hundreds of bioships surrounding it. Captain Min-ho watched calmly as energy weapons charged all around his vessel. "All stations, prepare for concentrated enemy fire," he announced over the ship's communication system. "Point defense ready, Captain," Weapons Officer Han Jae-wook reported. Rail cannons charged and targeting multiple enemies. "Fire when ready." The Velkari fleet opened fire with the largest concentrated barrage in galactic history. 800 ships firing simultaneously, their combined energy output equivalent to a small star. Space itself seemed to burn as plasma bolts, biomissiles, and gravity bombs converged on the human ship. The Indomitable disappeared inside a ball of energy that could be seen from the outer planets. Admiral Texbar held his breath, waiting for the fire to clear. No ship could survive that much concentrated firepower, not even these impossible humans. The energy faded, and the Indomitable emerged completely unharmed. Worse, it was firing back. The human ship's rail cannons spoke with mechanical precision. One shot, one dead bioship. No wasted ammunition, no missed targets. The Velkari had hoped to overwhelm the enemy's defenses with sheer numbers, but the humans simply destroyed them faster than they could fire. "Impossible," Texbar whispered, watching his carefully planned defense crumble in minutes. Bioships that had served the Empire for centuries were reduced to debris. Vessels commanded by his most trusted officers simply ceased to exist. The mathematical advantage he had counted on meant nothing against weapons that could not miss and defenses that could not be penetrated. "Admiral," his communications officer called out desperately. "Captain Vexicole is requesting permission to retreat." "Denied. We hold this line." But even as he spoke, Texabar could see ships breaking formation. Captains who had never known defeat were abandoning their positions, their crews panicking as death approached with unstoppable efficiency. The Indomitable continued its methodical destruction. 100 ships dead. 200. 300. "Admiral," his tactical officer said urgently. "We have to withdraw. We're losing ships faster than we can count them." Texbar looked around his command center. His officers were right. This was not a battle. It was an execution, and he was running out of ships to sacrifice. "All vessels," he transmitted on the fleet frequency, "begin immediate withdrawal. Fall back to secondary positions." The surviving Velkari ships fled in disorder, abandoning the Meridian Line and the entire outer defense network. Behind them, the Indomitable continued firing until the last bioship jumped to hyperspace. In 4 hours, 800 ships had been reduced to less than 200 survivors. Emperor Thexaval received the news in his private chambers. The Meridian Line had fallen. His outer defenses were gone. Human ships were now advancing toward the core systems of his empire. For the first time in his very long life, the Emperor of the Velkari was truly afraid. He activated his personal communication system and sent a message directly to Earth. It was time to face the reality that his empire was dying. To the leaders of humanity, the message began. "This is Emperor Thexval of the Velkari Empire. I am prepared to discuss terms for ending this conflict. Please respond if you are willing to negotiate." Dr. Park Soo-jin received the message 12 hours later. She read it twice, then smiled grimly. "Doctor," Admiral Daeho asked, "how do we respond?" Soo-jin looked at the galactic map one more time. The red markers were now concentrated around only a few hundred core systems. The Velkari Empire that had once ruled the galaxy was reduced to a small fraction of its former size. "Prepare a response," she said. "Tell the Emperor that Earth will accept his surrender when he agrees to our terms. Complete withdrawal from all occupied worlds. Reparations for 3,000 years of conquest. And a guarantee that the Velkari will never again threaten any peaceful species." "And if he refuses?" Soo-jin's smile grew colder. "Then we continue the liberation until there are no more Velkari ships left to destroy." Across the galaxy, 6 human Dreadnoughts received new orders. The final phase of the war was about to begin. The Velkari Empire had ruled through fear for 3 millennia. Now it was their turn to be afraid. News of the Kepler 442 disaster spread across the Velkari Empire like wildfire. General Vextar's surviving ships limped back to Imperial space, carrying reports that no one wanted to believe. An entire invasion fleet destroyed by a single unknown vessel. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. Emperor Thexaval stood in his war room on Nexus Prime, studying the tactical recordings over and over again. The grainy sensor data showed his bioships being systematically destroyed by weapons that defied understanding, kinetic weapons that moved at near light speed, defenses that made energy attacks useless. "How many species know of this defeat?" he asked his intelligence minister. "The news is spreading, Your Majesty. Pirates, traders, and communications traffic throughout the outer systems. Within days, every civilized world will know that the Velkari fleet was beaten." The Emperor's 6 eyes focused on the display showing the unknown ship. 3,000 years of conquest had built the empire on the simple fact that no one could match Velkari military power. Now that fact was no longer true. "What do we know about these humans?" Intelligence Minister Kextal consulted his reports. "Very little, Your Majesty. They appear to be a young species, perhaps a few thousand years old. They have small colonies scattered across maybe 20 star systems. Nothing that should pose a threat. Yet one of their ships destroyed 200 of ours. Yes, Your Majesty, we underestimated them badly." On Earth, Dr. Park Soo-jin received hourly updates from the Indomitable. The ship had performed even better than her most optimistic projections. Captain Lee Min-ho's crew had operated with perfect efficiency, and the vessel's systems had handled the combat stress without any problems. But more importantly, the galaxy now knew that humanity existed and could not be ignored. "Doctor," her assistant said, entering the underground laboratory, "we're receiving communications from across the galaxy. Dozens of species are asking about Earth and human technology." Su-jin smiled. Project Thunderbolt had been designed with two goals. First, to defend humanity from galactic threats. Second, to announce humanity's presence in a way that could not be dismissed or ignored. What kind of communications? Trade requests, mostly. Several species are offering technology exchanges. The Centauri Republic wants to establish formal, diplomatic relations. Even some Velkari worlds are sending secret messages asking about possible alliances. And the Velkari Empire itself? Nothing official yet, but our intelligence networks are reporting panic in their core systems. Ships being recalled from frontier sectors. Emergency military meetings. Su-jin nodded. The Empire was reacting exactly as predicted. When a power structure built on military superiority faced a superior force, it had two choices: adapt or collapse. Captain Lee Min-ho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as it moved through hyperspace toward their next target. The ship's mission was far from over. Earth had spent 15 years preparing for this moment, and one victory was not enough to secure humanity's place in the galaxy. Navigator Park Hee-won, what's our estimated arrival time at the Rigel system? 14 hours, Captain. Long-range sensors are already detecting Velkari ships in the area. The Rigel system contained 3 colonies belonging to different species, all of them under Velkari occupation. According to Earth's intelligence, the local Velkari fleet consisted of 40 bioships commanded by Admiral Nexthor, one of the Empire's most experienced officers. Science Officer Yoon Taemin, what do we know about Admiral Nexthor? Veteran Commander Captain. He's conquered 18 star systems over the past century, never been defeated. His ships specialize in orbital bombardment and civilian intimidation. Min-ho frowned. The Velkari approach to occupation was brutal and efficient. Resist and they would burn your cities from orbit. Submit and they would take most of your population as slaves. It was a system that had worked for 3 millennia. How many civilians in the Rigel colonies? Approximately 8 million across 3 worlds, Captain. 8 million people living under Velkari occupation, waiting for liberation that might never come. Min-ho thought about his orders from Earth. Show the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Demonstrate that the Velkari Empire could be beaten. All stations prepare for combat operations. We'll be dropping out of hyperspace directly into the enemy fleet. Meanwhile, in the Rigel system, Admiral Nexthor was receiving disturbing reports from across the Empire. A human ship had destroyed General Vextar's invasion fleet. Impossible weapons, impossible defenses. The reports made no sense. Nexthor had commanded Velkari fleets for over 2 centuries. He had seen every type of weapon, every kind of defense. Energy shields could be overwhelmed. Kinetic barriers could be bypassed. Armor could be penetrated. There was no such thing as perfect protection. "Admiral," his sensor operator called out. "Detecting hyperspace emergence. Single ship, unknown configuration." Nexthor turned to his tactical display. The unknown vessel was materializing at the edge of the system, exactly where General Vextar had described in his reports. Large, angular, and moving with mechanical precision. Is that the human ship? Configuration matches the descriptions, Admiral. It's heading directly for our fleet. Nexthor studied the tactical situation. 40 bioships against 1 enemy vessel. Even if the reports were true, even if this ship had destroyed Vextar's fleet, 40 ships should be enough to handle it. All vessels, attack formation, target the unknown ship. We'll test these impossible weapons for ourselves. The Indomitable dropped out of hyperspace and immediately began accelerating toward the Velkari fleet. Captain Min-ho watched the enemy ship scramble to intercept him. "Captain," Communications Officer Choi Ye-jin reported, "we're receiving multiple transmissions from the Rigel colonies. They're asking if we're here to help them." "Tell them help has arrived," Min-ho replied. Weapons Officer Han Jae-wook, Target the Velkari command ship first. Make this quick. Understood, Captain. Rail cannons charged and ready. The Velkari fleet opened fire at maximum range, hoping to overwhelm the human ship before it could get close. Biomissiles filled space, followed by plasma cannon fire and gravity bombs. It was the same tactic that had worked for thousands of years. The Indomitable's point defense systems activated, creating a wall of kinetic interceptors that destroyed everything the Velkari threw at them. The human ship continued its approach, without slowing down. Impossible, Admiral Nexthor whispered, watching his weapons prove completely useless. The Indomitable fired its rail cannons. The first salvo targeted the command ship's engines, crippling it without destroying it completely. The second salvo eliminated the ships closest to the colonies, preventing any attempt at orbital bombardment. In minutes, half the Velkari fleet was gone. "Admiral," Nexthor's communications officer called out desperately, "the Colonial Defense Forces are requesting permission to surrender." "Denied. We do not surrender to primitives." But even as he spoke, Nexthor could see his fleet falling apart. Ships were breaking formation, some trying to flee, others attempting desperate ramming attacks that the human vessel's point defense easily stopped. The Indomitable methodically destroyed ship after ship, its weapons firing with mechanical precision. There was no anger, no hatred, just efficient elimination of targets. It was somehow more terrifying than any passionate attack. "Admiral," his tactical officer said quietly, "we have to withdraw. This is not a battle we can win." Nexthor looked around his damaged command center. Half his fleet was gone. The remainder was scattered and demoralized. The human ship was approaching his flagship, its weapons still firing. "Signal fleet withdrawal," he ordered bitterly. "All ships jump to hyperspace immediately." The surviving Velkari vessels fled the system, leaving the 3 Rigel colonies free for the first time in decades. Captain Minho watched them go, then activated the communication system. "People of Rigel," his voice carried to all 3 worlds. "This is Captain Lee Minho of the United Earthship Indomitable. Your worlds are now under the protection of humanity. The Velkari will not be returning." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of voices crying out in joy and relief and disbelief. After generations of occupation, they were finally free. Dr. Park Soo-jin received the after-action report 12 hours later. Another Velkari fleet destroyed, another system liberated. The plan was working perfectly. "Doctor," her assistant said, "we're getting reports from across the galaxy. The Velkari are pulling back from frontier systems. Some species are declaring independence, others are asking for human protection." And the Empire's response? Emergency sessions on Nexus Prime. Their military is in chaos. Some admirals are calling for negotiation. Others want to launch a massive counterattack. Soo-jin looked at the galactic map on her wall. Red markers showed Velkari-controlled systems. Blue markers showed human colonies. Yellow markers showed recently liberated worlds. The red was shrinking. The blue was growing. And the yellow was spreading across the galaxy like hope itself. "Prepare the second wave," she ordered. "It's time to show the Empire what happens when you threaten humanity." Across the galaxy, 5 more Indomitable-class dreadnoughts received their orders. The liberation of the galaxy had begun, and nothing would stop it now. General Vextar felt his 3 hearts beating faster than they had in decades. 20 of his finest ships destroyed in minutes by weapons that should not exist. The unknown vessel was now accelerating toward his main fleet, moving with impossible speed and precision. "Analysis," he barked at his science officer. "General, their weapons appear to be purely kinetic. Solid projectiles accelerated to enormous velocities. Our bioarmor is designed to absorb and deflect energy weapons, but kinetic impact at those speeds." The officer's mandibles clicked nervously. "Our hulls cannot withstand that kind of force." Vextar stared at the tactical display. In 3,000 years of conquest, the Velkari had perfected their approach to warfare. Overwhelming firepower, superior technology, and the knowledge that no species could match their bioships in battle. Now a single vessel was making all of that meaningless. How is this possible? Kinetic weapons are primitive technology. Yes, General, but these are not primitive kinetic weapons. The energy required to accelerate projectiles to near light speed is enormous. Their power systems must be far beyond anything we've encountered. The Indomitable continued its approach, ignoring the remaining 180 Velkari ships as if they were insignificant. Captain Lee Minho stood calmly on his bridge, watching the enemy fleet's formation begin to waver. "Status report," he ordered. Engineer Kim So-young checked her displays. Exotic matter reactors operating at 20% capacity. All systems nominal. Point defense grid shows no stress from the previous engagement. Rail cannons? Weapons Officer Han Jae-wook smiled grimly. "Fully charged and ready, Captain. We used less than 5% of our ammunition destroying that squadron." Science Officer Yoon Tae-min looked up from his analysis station. "Captain, I'm detecting significant electromagnetic interference from the Velkari ships. Their biotechnology generates a lot of neural activity. Will it affect our targeting?" "No, sir. If anything, it makes them easier to track." Minho nodded. The Indomitable had been designed to fight against unknown technologies and unknown tactics. Its sensors could track targets using dozens of different methods. Its weapons could adjust to counter any defense. Distance to the main fleet? Navigator Park Haiwan checked her calculations. 50,000 kilometers in closing. The enemy ships are beginning to move into attack formation. Through the Indomitable's viewports, the crew could see the Velkari fleet spreading out like a vast net. Bioships pulsed with threatening colors, their organic weapons charging for a massive coordinated strike. "Captain?" Communications Officer Choi Ye-jin reported. "We're receiving multiple transmissions from the Velkari fleet. They're trying to coordinate their attack." "Let them," Minho replied calmly. "It won't matter." General Vextar was indeed trying to coordinate his fleet's response. He had never faced an enemy like this, but he had not conquered half the galaxy by giving up easily. "All ships full attack formation. Concentrate fire on the unknown vessel. Use everything we have." "General," his tactical officer warned, "our weapons may not be effective against their defenses." "Then we use more weapons," Vextar snarled. 180 ships against one. Even if their defenses are strong, they cannot stop everything. The Velkari fleet opened fire with everything they had. Hundreds of plasma cannons erupted simultaneously. Biomissiles launched in massive swarms. Gravity bombs deployed to crush the enemy ship. Organic boarding pods fired in case the vessel survived the bombardment. It was the most concentrated firepower ever deployed by the Velkari Empire. Enough energy to destroy a small moon, all focused on a single target. The Indomitable disappeared inside a ball of fire and energy that lit up the entire star system. For a moment, General Vextar allowed himself to hope. No ship could survive that kind of punishment. Not even this mysterious vessel with its impossible weapons. Then the fire cleared, and the Indomitable emerged completely unharmed. Its adaptive armor had absorbed the energy weapons. Its electromagnetic barriers had deflected the plasma. Its point defense had destroyed every missile and boarding pod. The gravity bombs had been torn apart by defensive fire before they could activate. "Impossible," Vextar whispered. On the Indomitable's bridge, Captain Minho brushed a speck of dust off his uniform. The ship had barely felt the Velkari attack. "Damage report," he requested calmly. "No damage, Captain," Engineer Kim So-young reported. "Hull temperature increased by 3 degrees. That's all. Their weapons are completely ineffective against our defenses," Science Officer Yoon Tae-min added. "Energy-based attacks cannot penetrate our barriers, and their kinetic weapons are too slow to get past our point defense." Minho studied the tactical display. 180 enemy ships, all of them now defenseless against his weapons. He felt no pleasure in what he had to do, but Earth's orders were clear. Humanity would no longer hide from the galaxy. Weapons Officer Han Jae-wook. "Yes, Captain?" "Begin the demonstration." The Indomitable's rail cannons opened fire. Not the focused barrage that had destroyed the attack squadron, but a steady, methodical bombardment. 1 shot per target, 1 dead Velkari ship every few seconds. The tungsten projectiles moved too fast for the bioships to dodge. Their organic hulls evolved over millennia to resist energy weapons, offered no protection against pure kinetic force. Each impact released energy equivalent to a nuclear weapon. Bioships that had conquered entire civilizations were reduced to debris in seconds. Vessels that had never known defeat simply ceased to exist. Admiral Day-Ho watched from his flagship as the impossible battle unfolded. The mysterious ship was systematically destroying the entire Velkhari fleet. One by one, the bioships were being eliminated with surgical precision. "Admiral," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel." "Put it through." A new voice came over the speakers. Young, calm, and speaking perfect Korean. "Admiral Kim Dae-ho, this is Captain Lee Min-ho of the United Earthship Indomitable. Earth sends its regards." Dae-ho felt his legs go weak. Earth. This ship was from Earth. Somehow, impossibly, his homeworld had built a vessel that could destroy the Velkhari Empire's finest fleet. "Captain Lee," Dae-ho managed to say, "it's good to hear from you. The situation is under control, Admiral. We'll have this cleaned up shortly." General Vextar watched helplessly as his fleet died around him. Ship after ship was being destroyed, by weapons he could not understand, fired by an enemy he had never heard of until today. "General," his communications officer called out, "Captain Dexvor is requesting permission to retreat." "Denied. We do not retreat." But even as he spoke, Vextar could see bioships beginning to break formation. Captains who had never known fear were turning away from the battle, their crews panicking as death approached with mechanical precision. The Indomitable continued its methodical destruction. 50 ships dead, 70, 100. "General," his tactical officer said urgently, "we have to withdraw. This is not a battle. This is an execution." Vextar looked around his command chamber. His officers were right. This was not war as the Velkhari understood it. The enemy was not trying to defeat them or capture their ships. They were simply eliminating threats with the same efficiency they might use to clear debris from a shipping lane. "All ships," he transmitted on the fleet frequency, "begin immediate withdrawal to hyperspace." The surviving Velkhari vessels turned and fled, abandoning their attack formation as they raced toward the edge of the system. Behind them, the Indomitable continued firing until the last bioship jumped to hyperspace. In less than 2 hours, a fleet of 200 ships had been reduced to 37 survivors. Captain Min-ho stood on his bridge watching the enemy retreat. His ship's AI, which the crew had nicknamed Soul, provided a final tactical update. "Enemy fleet withdrawal confirmed, Captain. Threat level reduced to 0. Casualties? No human casualties, Captain. Enemy losses, 163. Vessels destroyed." Min-ho nodded and activated the communication system. It was time to deliver Earth's message to the galaxy. "General Vextar, this is Captain Lee Min-ho. You are receiving this transmission because Earth wishes the Velkhari Empire to understand something very important." From his fleeing flagship, General Vextar listened with growing dread. The Velkhari Empire is no longer welcome in human space. Any ship found within 50 light-years of a human colony will be destroyed without warning. Earth remembers every world you have burned. Every species you have enslaved. We are coming. The transmission ended, leaving silence across the star system. Admiral Day-ho stared at the Indomitable as it slowly turned toward his fleet. The mysterious ship had just announced humanity's entry into galactic politics in the most dramatic way possible. The age of Velkhari dominance was ending. The age of humanity had begun. The Velkhari invasion fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a plague of locusts. 200 bioships materialized around Kepler 442, each one larger than Admiral Day-ho's flagship. The organic vessels pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, their living hulls breathing in the vacuum of space. General Vextar stood in the command chamber of his flagship, a massive creature of flesh and metal that had conquered 40 star systems. Through the transparent membrane that served as a viewing port, he could see the pathetic human fleet arrayed before him. 12 small ships against his armada. "Open communications," Vextar commanded. "Channel open, General." Humans, Vextar's Voice boomed across space. Your time has expired. Surrender now and you will be permitted to serve the Empire as slaves. Resist, and every last one of you will be exterminated. On his bridge, Admiral Deho looked around at his crew. They were scared, but they were ready. These were good people who had left Earth to build something new among the stars. They deserved better than slavery. Open a channel, Deho ordered. Admiral, his tactical officer whispered, we count 200 enemy ships. Their smallest. Vessel outguns our entire fleet. Deho nodded grimly. I know. He activated the communication system. General Vextar, this is Admiral Kim Deho. Humanity has considered your offer. And? Humanity declines. The silence that followed lasted exactly 30 seconds. Then General Vextar began to laugh. The sound was alien and horrible, like breaking glass mixed with screaming wind. Very well, Admiral. You have chosen extinction. All units, attack formation. Destroy the human ships, then begin orbital bombardment of their colonies. The Velkari fleet began to move forward, bioships spreading out like the wings of some terrible bird. Energy weapons charged with crackling power. Organic missiles writhed in their launch tubes, eager to be released. That was when long-range sensors detected the anomaly. General, the sensor operator called out. We have a contact at the edge of the system. Single ship, unknown configuration. Vexitar turned away from the human fleet. Show me. The main display shifted to show a ship unlike anything in the Velkari databases. It was angular where bioships were curved, metallic where they were organic. It moved with perfect precision, not the flowing grace of living vessels. What species built that? Vextar demanded. Unknown, General. It's not in any of our records. The strange ship was approaching at high speed, its trajectory taking it directly toward the battle zone. It was large, perhaps half the size of Vextar's flagship, but it moved like a much smaller vessel. Hail them, Vextar ordered. If this was some new species trying to interfere, they would learn the price of opposing the Empire. Communications. Officer Choi Yejin aboard the Velkari flagship tried multiple times to establish contact. Finally, a response came through. The voice calm and speaking perfect Velkari. This is Captain Lee Min-ho of the United Earth ship Indomitable. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system. The command chamber fell silent. General Vextar stared at the display showing the lone ship. After a moment, he began to laugh again. Did you hear that? He asked his officers. One ship. One single ship is threatening our entire fleet. He activated the communications array himself. Unknown vessel, you are outnumbered 200 to 1. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. The response came back immediately. 15 seconds. General, the tactical officer reported. The unknown ship is accelerating. It's moving directly toward Attack Squadron 7. Vextar looked at the tactical display. Attack Squadron 7 consisted of 20 of his finest bioships, each one a veteran of dozens of campaigns. They were moving to intercept the strange vessel. Let them handle it, Vextar decided. 20 ships should be more than enough to deal with one primitive newcomer. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Lee Min-ho watched the approaching Velkari squadron with calm eyes. His crew had trained for this moment for years, but now that it was here, everything felt strangely peaceful. Distance to targets? He asked. 200,000 kilometers and closing, reported Navigator Park Haiwan. Weapons status? Weapons Officer Han Jae-wook checked his displays. Point defense systems online. Rail cannons charged and ready. Singularity torpedoes armed. Very good. Min-ho studied the tactical display. 20 bioships were approaching in a classic Velkari attack formation. They would fire everything they had the moment they came within range. Captain, Communications Officer Kim So-young said, the Velkari ships are charging weapons. Min-ho nodded. The enemy was following their standard doctrine. Overwhelm the target with massive firepower, then move in to finish off whatever survived. Distance? 100,000 kilometers. The Velkari ships opened fire. Plasma cannons erupted in brilliant flashes. Biomissiles launched by the dozens, their organic warheads seeking heat and motion. Gravity bombs deployed to crush the strange ship's hull. "Point defense engage," Minho ordered quietly. What happened next had never been seen before in galactic warfare. The Indomitable's hull erupted with thousands of tiny flashes as its point defense systems activated. Hypervelocity interceptors shot out in all directions, each one a tungsten dart moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The space between the ships became a wall of death. Every plasma bolt was intercepted and destroyed. Every biomissile was shredded before it could arm. The gravity bombs were torn apart by kinetic impacts they had never been designed to withstand. In 30 seconds, the Velkari's devastating alpha strike was completely neutralized. "Impossible," General Vextar whispered, watching from his flagship. On the Indomitable, Weapons Officer Han Jae-wook looked up from his controls. "Point defense successful, Captain. No damage to our hull. Enemy squadron is now within rail cannon range." Captain Minho looked at the tactical display one more time. 20 bioships that had probably conquered entire star systems. Ships that had never known defeat. Vessels whose crews had spent lifetimes perfecting the art of war. "Fire," he said, simply. The Indomitable's main rail cannon spoke for the first time in anger. There was no flash, no explosion, no dramatic light show. Just tungsten projectiles accelerated to incredible velocity by magnetic fields. The first bioship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next it was an expanding cloud of organic debris. The second ship tried to turn away, but the rail cannon round punched through its living hull like paper. The third ship managed to fire one last plasma bolt before it too was destroyed. In less than a minute, 20 Velkari warships were dead. The silence that followed was absolute. 200,000 Velkari warriors stared at their screens in shock. Their finest attack squadron had been wiped out by a single ship using weapons they had never seen before. General Vextar felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Fear. "What are those weapons?" he demanded. "Unknown, General. They appear to be purely kinetic, solid projectiles moving at extreme velocity." "Kinetic weapons?" Vextar was confused. "But kinetic weapons are primitive. They're what species use before they develop energy weapons." "Yes, General. But these projectiles are moving at nearly light speed." On his bridge, Admiral Daeho watched in amazement as the unknown ship destroyed 20 Velkari vessels without taking a single hit. His tactical officer was scanning the strange vessel with everything they had. "Admiral," the officer reported, "I'm reading impossible energy signatures from that ship. Their power output is off the charts. Can you identify them?" "The ship's configuration. Admiral, I think that's a human vessel." Daeho stared at the display. "A human ship?" But that was impossible. Earth's most advanced warships were barely a match for a single Velkari scout. Unless Earth had been building something in secret. The Indomitable completed its destruction of the attack squadron and began accelerating toward the main Velkari fleet. Captain Minho activated the communication system again. "General Vextar," his voice carried across space, "you now have 15 seconds to begin withdrawing from this system. This is your only warning."